earlier about, Reverend Kathy is putting together the Science of Mind curriculum, the curriculum that is behind our teaching, and those classes that can lead to eventual practitionership and on. And in the meantime, can really give us a great insight into our lives. And this week, I've been reflecting on, I've kicked around a little bit in education. I've always been a pretty heavy reader. I've got some formal education, and I've studied things like spirituality, man's religion, comparative religion. I've studied some psychology and sociology. I like theologies, kind of, except for biology. I never really liked that one, but it was, didn't. It was a little bit icky for me, but that's okay. That's just me. And it wasn't until I got into the study, the ideas that our founder, Ernest Holmes, brought forward, and then the other people, our metaphysical ancestors, like the Fillmores of Unity and stuff, those people. And I began to study for the first time someone who actually got into the aspect of ourselves known as personality. It's so interesting to me because personality to me has always been such a crucial aspect of my own experience. And in the years that I have worked with people professionally, that I've been in the people who have worked with me when I've needed it, and the people that I've had the blessing to work with, that personality, in my opinion, plays such a pivotal role. And it really began to cause me to think more deeply into what it is to be a human being, to watch my 3 children as they came into the world in their early years of growing up. And so I have 3 kids, and their personalities are so different. And I mean right away, even when they were just like basically just making messes, you know what I'm saying? There was a personality that began to emerge, right? They were all so different. So when we think about personality, we think about, imagine sort of that window by which we are looking at the world through. And that window of personality, and so I was thinking about how did it start showing up in my kids? Well, right away it was what caught their attentions. When little children actually start moving around, looking and reacting and responding and being stimulated, the stimulations. What was stimulating them? That was different for all of them. What were their reactions to things was different. I had my oldest son was smiley and happy and laughed very easily, and what caught his attention was balls. I mean, footballs, baseballs, soccer ball. Even before he could walk, he would, if there was a ball on the floor, he went for it and he rolled it around and he swatted it and he'd go after it and chase it. And he was very easygoing, and he was. When he cried, you knew something was really wrong, like a diaper rash, or he was hungry, or whatever. You knew that, and he would go down to bed pretty easy. He was a pretty easy kid, that way, And then my second son came along, and he was just like this little live wire, man, and he was irritated and agitated, and he was questioning, and he as a little kid, he'd look right through you, It's like, oh my God, where did you come from, And just. And very reactionary, but he was drawn to things like crayons and stuff like that, and he would create, and sometimes on the walls, but things like that, and he, as he got older, he was very thoughtful, and he looked deeper, and he was questioning, and he had attitudes, and he had opinions and things like that. Then my daughter came along, and she was kind of like chasing butterflies, and she was kind of but she was always into her own thing wherever that was, and she would kind of go back a little bit. She wasn't very talkative. She was pleasant, and she was kind of irritable. I don't know if any of you have ever had a baby that expressed rage. She expressed rage as a baby. And the doctor showed us how we needed to wrap her up in a blanket and hold her very tightly, because that's what the doctor said, that's what she was looking for. Her rage, her outbreaks of rage, she would scream. It was like a banshee. She was like, and she was just scream, and she turned colors, and so we just hold her tight and just go through it, and eventually you could feel her come down. So what Ernest Holmes says about what he calls the power of personalities, and when I said something earlier about this thing called you, Holmes doesn't use the word personality a lot, but if you read that, it's a little tiny book, you kind of, if you set your mind around the idea of personality, you can see where he's kind of going with it, right? So Holmes says, while in this physical material world, personality is bound to use mechanical laws and methods. Thus, outcome is based on its knowledge of spiritual truth. And so what's that mean? We have the ethereal world, we have the power behind, we have the invisible, we have that raw kind of definition of spirit. And we think of things like synchronicities, and we think of things like divine intervention, and we think of things that have appeared for people in millennia. Things have been called miracles, they've been called mystical, they've been called, we don't really know what happened, but we know that there was something higher there. So we have that, but then we have the physical. I'm here, I got my clothes on, got my shoes on, drove my car, combed my hair. We have this thing called gravity, and I've learned as I've gotten older, it's coming for you, And so we have that. That's part of the physical material world. And Holmes says, in an optimal kind of way, in the physical world, we must align our physical approaches with spirit. Okay, what does that mean? So let's cut to the chase. When we come into this world, we have a personality. Our personality lands in the middle of a circus. That circus is called the family. Okay? Now, that circus has been going on for generations. Not just there, generations. Opinions, ideas. Do this, don't do that. What's accepted, what's not accepted. Communication or non-communication. Dysfunction or function. All kinds of, so we come down and we land in that circus. And our personality begins to interact with that circus. And sometimes that interaction can cause some challenges. My sister and I, at different times, landed in a circus. My sister had a very different reaction to the circus. She was all for it. She was all in. She loved the circus. She agreed with it. The circus never told her anything she didn't think was wonderful. She planned her whole life on the circus. She was all in. Andy came along and didn't like the circus, struggled with the circus, went to war with the circus, argued with the circus, okay? All right. So, what Holmes is saying, as I read this, is that sometimes the circus we come into wants to change our personality. I don't know if any of you who have been parented can relate to that. Yeah. Bad boys, bad girls, right? You talk too much. My family would say, Andy, you're too much. They said that. Andy, you are too much. Take it outside. I don't want to hear it. I don't know why. Can you imagine why they would say that about me? I have no idea. And not as a little kid, I had attitude, but then I grew into it, right? God bless my beloved, dear, sainted mother, but she really struggled with Andy's attitude, right? We had a lot of intense conversations about how I should show up. And I was aware of the fact that I would embarrass her, or I would, or things like that, right? And so what Holmes is saying is, in what his work gets into, and if you want the whole 9 yards, Holmes wrote a lot about personality in Science Mind textbook. Just go into the concordance and look it up. There are all kinds of ideas in there about the importance of the personality. Because ultimately, Holmes says, when we go into our lives, we are leading with personality, right? Hey, I want you to go to the horse farm and we're all going to saddle up and ride around. And someone says, man, I'm not into that. That's not my thing. You don't understand. That's not my get down. What is that? That's personality, We're going to go smell the wildflowers. No, there's rattlesnakes out there. I'm not doing that, right? We're going to eat, Italian food. No, I want a burrito, right? That's personality. We're leading with that. But on a more important level, it is the decisions we make around our relationships, our direction in life, our meaning, our purpose, how we perceive the world, how we project into the world. Religious ideas and philosophies are driven largely by purpose. The reason that personality is so important to me is because something that I'm aware of is coming to a place in life and saying to someone, I don't know if I know who I am. I've been there. And I have certainly encountered a lot of that. I encounter that every week. Andy, I don't know who I am. And there's something interesting about in the change culture, in the healing culture, in the transformation culture, we have words. Let me give you a word, for example, like the word recovery. And someone will see, life has gotten out of hand, so we introduce the word recovery. And so they say, well, what does that mean? What am I recovering? You're recovering your true self. I don't know that. I don't know who I am. And so one of the shortcuts you can take is, okay, can you go back and think about when you were a really little kid? Can you begin to, that's why inner child work, right? Go back to when I'm a little kid. What was it that wound your watch? What turned you on? What were your passions? What were your directions? How did you see the world? And then I will get, I don't know. Because I don't remember being a little kid. So our approach to that is this idea, and this is very Holmes-ish approach, is, okay, I want you to, so, you know how we're always running away from pain and discomfort? Like, oh, get out of here, pain, get out of here. Well, I would suggest we take a moment with it. And I'll tell you why. We're talking about courage this month and this year or whatever we're doing. The courage to sit with discomfort. And I'll tell you why. So it's something like this. Let's say that when someone came in and landed in the circus, let's just take one thing. Let's say that in that circus, there was a tradition of what would be called emotional unavailability. And what that means is that if you are hurting, if you are crying, if you are whatever, and you're expressing that, the circus said, we don't want to see that, we don't want to talk about it, take that somewhere else. That's called emotional unavailability. And so, for example, you'll talk to someone and say, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself, so you tune your hearing. And you'll hear them say something like, I always really struggled with fill in the blank. Well, you struggled with what? Well, like my little sister be crying, and one of the circus masters would say, if you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about, right? And so the person I'm talking to says, I would go over and I would try and hold her, and so the circus master would say, no, don't hold her, don't coddle her, don't do that, you go away too, right? And this person would say, I always struggled with that. I hated that. I never got used to that. So if we reverse engineer that, what's that tell us about their personality? They're someone with empathy, someone with a capacity to love, someone with the capacity to show up. And so then you can say, is that a little bit of your personality? Is that part of who you were? Same can be said of the kid who was always taking chances. He was putting on his Superman cape and jumping off the roof. I had one of those, right? Jumping off his bunk bed. He dislocated his shoulder. Why'd you do that? Because Batman does it, you know? And so come down in the circuits, and the circuits masters do not want chances taken, do not want passions followed, do not want, I remember my grandfather saying one time, and I get it from his background, this, I want to go do this, I want to go do that, I want to be a musician, I want to be an astronaut. And grandfather said, those kinds of dreams hurt people, because when you don't make it, then you can't pay the bills. And that was one of the circus masters talking, right? And so grow up, and you're not willing to take chances, not willing to explore, not willing to have a passion, right? And so one day you're sitting with a counselor and you say, that always kind of bothered me. I always thought there was something more, but I couldn't do that. Oh, wow, that's part of your personality. Charles Fillmore says, individuality, okay? And so Holmes talks about spirituality and that part. Fillmore uses the term individuality, meaning the spiritual part of it. Individuality-based personality is independent of others' materials ideas. Is independent of others' material ideas, independent of the circus, is what he's saying. And so it's about this idea of restoration. There is no one in this philosophy that will tell you that there is something out there that you need to get to save you. What we will tell you is there is something within you to be restored. And according to Ernest Holmes, it is our personalities, the original personality. So I want to cut to the chase, and I'll tell you something that I love Ernest Holmes for so much. Oh my God, someday when I see him, I'm going to give him a hug for this and a sloppy kiss, because I'll tell you why. I was raised fundamentalist Christian, and I heard the story of the prodigal child all the time, right? And the prodigal child was the villain in the way I heard it. That kid got up there, and he was born into wealth, and he had a good family. And you know what he did? He ran away, and he went to go, eat with the pigs and stuff like that, right? How dare he turned his back on the family. But he learned his lesson out there because he doubled back, right? And so it was presented to me as salvation, which is, that original sin, that original something's wrong with us. We are separate from spirit. When, we believe there is nothing further from the truth. We have always been with spirit. We will always be with spirit, right? So Ernest Holmes and he devotes almost a whole chapter in his book on the prodigal son, but I'll say the prodigal child. I love it. I love this story, the way he tells it. He said one day the prodigal decided that he needed to go out and make the great discovery for himself. End of sentence. I love that. What is the great discovery? That's up to us. That means, I'd like to try something outside the circus, sir. Could I do that? Can you show me out of the tent at this moment? Because I think there's something out there that may actually wind my watch and turn me on, right? The prodigal decided he needed to go make the great discovery for himself. So then he goes out there, and most of us know the story. He fell in with some people that, were hard to deal with, and the animals and all that, and all, he just, got into poverty, got into struggles. Once again, don't ever underestimate a little bit of discomfort. He was really uncomfortable out there. But he, in that process, did make the great discovery for himself. And we say, what was that? And this is the clue. He doubles his way back. And the divine parent welcomes him back into a state of consciousness where there was a ring placed upon his finger. And in those days, in that historical context, the metaphor of that is the ring represents his birthright to something larger. All because he confronted his personality. And he worked with his personality. And he aligned with his personality. The great discovery he made was his alignment with the truth of who he was. That truth of that child who knew coming in who and what he was before the circus got a hold of him. That's the great discovery. I love Ernest Holmes because for me, because I always loved the prodigal child because I could relate to it, right? I could relate to that. And Holmes took him from the villain to the hero. Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. And what's the hero do? He comes back having found the great discovery, which is himself. All right. Thank you very much, guys. All right. So, Mr. Darnell. Oh, people want to talk to you back there. He's got his fans. But he'll give you an autograph later.